In this exercise, we're going to demonstrate how to use slicers and PowerPivot to create interactive dashboard components. We're also going to learn how to use form controls, the group box, and other Excel tools to organize the dashboard components in a logical manner. After viewing this demo, you should understand how to link slicers to multiple pivot tables and charts to implement interactive dashboards. We will also keep the key principles of design in mind as we build our dashboard components. Beginning in cell B68, we have 3 pivot tables: number of flights, average delay, and average ticket price. We're going to use these to build our charts. As part of this exercise, we need to create a pivot chart for each of the 3 pivot tables. Let's start with the flight volume over time pivot table. First, we're going to click on any cell within the table and then navigate to the Pivot Table Tools tab. Since data in the pivot table we selected is a time series, we're going to create a line graph. So let's go ahead and click on the Pivot Chart button. Select the line option and click OK to create the chart. Now that we have our chart, we want to make sure we change the title to reflect the name of the data it is representing. First, we select the generic title of the chart, and then we put in flight volume over time as the new name. Move the graph so it isn't covering up any other chart elements. Next, we're going to look at how to format the chart that we just created. Let's begin by removing the extraneous field buttons that are currently showing on the chart, such as count of flights or month. This is done by navigating to the Analyze tab under Pivot Table on the ribbon and toggling the Buttons option located near the right of the screen. It is possible to selectively add or remove chart elements by clicking on the chart and finding the plus button in the upper right corner. We're going to use this functionality to remove the grid lines since this will make the chart easier to read. First, let's select the graph by clicking on it. Next, if we look in the upper right corner, we can see a plus sign button appear. Let's go ahead and click on that button. This takes us to a menu for chart elements where we can use checkboxes to select items that we want to display. We are looking to remove the grid lines, so let's uncheck that box in the menu. While you're here, also choose to remove the legend. As you can see, the graph no longer has grid lines. Next, we're going to remove the borders of the graph. In order to do this, select the graph and press the Control key followed by the 1 key. This will bring up the Format menu. We want to remove the border, so let's go to the tab called Border Line and check the No Line option. If we close the pop-up menu, you can see that the graph no longer has borders. We want the primary emphasis to be on the data elements of the chart, which can be accomplished by making the font color of the axes and title a lighter shade, much like we did in the previous section of this course. We do this by selecting the X-axis, navigating to the Home tab on the ribbon, and clicking on the Font Color option. We want to make the font lighter, yet not so light as to become difficult to read. Let's select a shade of gray. Now that we have selected a new font color, we need to make the same change to the Y-axis and to the title. Let's select them both by pressing the Control key and clicking on both items on the graph. We make sure to select the same color of gray under the font color option that we chose for the X-axis. We've now formatted our chart and have successfully kept the design principles in mind. As you can see, we have created and formatted an additional 2 pivot charts for the average delay and average ticket price pivot tables using the same methods we just discussed. Now that all 3 charts have been created and formatted, it is time to create a slicer. We start by clicking on any cell in one of the pivot tables, and then we are going to navigate to the Pivot Table Tools tab, where we click on the Insert Slicer option that can be found in the Filter section. Next, we select the route from the Flights table. From the Insert Slicers window, click on the Route checkbox within the Flights table. To minimize the number of elements on the dashboard, we want a single slicer with the ability to filter each of the pivot charts. To accomplish this, we need to connect the slicer to each of the pivot charts that were previously created. In order to do this, we're going to start by right-clicking on the slicer and then selecting the Report Connections option. Notice that of our 3 pivot tables, the pivot table we used to create the slicer is already selected. Let's go ahead and make sure that they have all been checked in order to ensure the slicer is affecting all 3 charts. Then click the OK button. We would like our slicer to have 2 columns. This can be done by right-clicking on the slicer and choosing Size and Properties from the drop-down menu. This opens up a window on the right-hand side of the screen. In order to change the number of columns, we need to navigate to the Position and Layout section and click on the button to increase the number of columns from 1 to 2. As part of the principles of design that we covered earlier in this course, we discussed the look and feel of a dashboard and how it's important to make sure that all related objects are the same size, since it will give the dashboard a more balanced look. Let's go ahead and resize our charts and our slicer so that we can fit them next to each other in a 2x2 matrix. Let's start by selecting all of the objects that we want to resize by clicking on each of the objects while holding the Control key. Once we have selected the 3 charts in the slicer, we're going to navigate to the Drawing Tools tab and then to the Size section. We're going to set the height at 1.85 and then we press Enter to confirm. We set the width at 4.0 and then we hit Enter to confirm. Note that the objects are now the same size. Next, we're going to arrange the 3 charts and the slicer in a dashboard format, starting with the flight volume over time and average delay charts on the first row. The average ticket chart and the slicer will be on the second row. We start by dragging the objects into their approximate positions before using the Excel alignment tools to finalize their positions. We're going to start by aligning the first row of the dashboard. Let's select the 2 charts on this row by clicking on them while holding down the Control key. Now that we have selected the objects, we're going to navigate to the Drawing Tools tab and select the Align Top option from the Align Tool dropdown. We repeat this action for the second row, selecting the charts and the slicer, and then aligning them using the Align Top option on the Drawing Tools tab. Now it's time to align the columns. We do this by selecting the objects in the column, which are the first and third chart. And then select the Align Left option on the Drawing Tools tab. We repeat this with the second column to finalize the dashboard. Select the second chart and the slicer, and then align them using the Align Left option on the Drawing Tools tab. We want to make sure we keep hierarchy in mind and respect the design principles, so let's add a group box around the 3 charts in the slicer. This will help the user identify that these 4 items are linked. In order to add this group box, we start by navigating to the Developer tab and clicking on the Insert button. Select the group box form control and drag it until it captures all of the charts and the slicer. We also want to make sure we replace the caption of the box with a meaningful title to finalize our dashboard. Let's call it Drill Down by Airline Route using the slicer. As you can see, we now have a finalized dashboard that incorporates both slicers and power charts to give a streamlined and interactive tool to the end user. Now it's your turn. Practice what you've learned by going to your exercise workbook and completing exercise 2, Slicers and PowerPivot.